hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thanks for all of you for tuning in. We have an exciting discussion. We're going to talk about the top 50 financial crime and compliance technology providers research that Rahul, Dheeraj, and Kriti have authored. We're really excited about sharing the insights from this research and also talking to all of you as we go along the way. And do let us know where are you joining us from, what are your expectations from this conversation today? And we'd love to hear more. Right, but we'll do a quick round of introductions at our end first, and I can go first given I'm speaking and in the rhythm, so I'll go first. So I'm Ronak, I'm partner with Everest Group, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with my team today. Dheeraj, over to you.
Thanks, Ronak. Hi, everyone. This is Dheeraj Maken, Vice President with Everest Group, currently leading the banking, financial services, and insurance service line and focusing on financial crime and compliance. Uh, Over to you, Kriti.
Thanks, Dheeraj. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Kriti Gupta. I'm a practice director at Everest Group. I look after our technology research across financial services and financial crime compliance. Excited to be here today and sharing our perspectives. Rahul?
Thank you, Kriti. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Hi from wherever you are joining. Rahul Mittal this side. I'm working as a practice director with Everest Group with the BFSI team with a special interest area in financial crime and compliance technology. So look forward to an engaging discussion today.
Perfect. No, again, we have the all-star team out here talking all things fin crime. So I'm hoping a lot of people find this more fun and interesting than talking about the next game or anything else. So we'll do that. I just wanted to ask, before I know everybody's assembling in, joining in, so we'll give everyone a minute to grab their coffee, come along with us on this journey. But let's get the conversation started, right? There's a lot of jargons in the market right now, right? So I see so many new technology terms and these jargons keep coming up across to us every day. So I wanted to ask, right, to all of you who are joining us on this LinkedIn Live, tell us, right, what is that one jargon that you would not want to continue or persist going forward, right? What is that one technology word that you don't want anymore because you're fed up of it? Will be fun to kind of hear your views and also tell us where are you logging in from, right? So, and I'm going to ask the same question to my team, right? So, Rahul, should I come to you first, right? So, this was your idea for this question. So I'm gonna get to you first, saying, tell me, right, what's that one jargon or technology term that you believe is now too overused and you're done with it?
I think this has been for some while, and I think we are using it more, which is like AI powered. Now, even if I buy, say, a coffee machine, probably it will also be AI powered. So that is a term which I think any of we are seeing anywhere. Maybe it's a object we are buying, or maybe as soon as any video we are seeing, everything seems to be AI powered. So there needs to be some a better definition to it, so that it feels like a differentiator.
Awesome. Good. So AI powered coffee is not for Rahul. Kriti, what for you?
No, as Rahul was talking about AI-powered coffee machines, coincidentally, I bought a TV few days back that is also claiming to be AI-powered. It comes pre-installed with a lot of these agents. I don't know what to do and use it for on a TV. And my daughter is still struggling with the AI button on the remote. So I completely get that, Rahul. But the phrase that I would retire, Ronak, and I think I'm also guilty of using it quite a few times, is the single source of truth. Every time, everywhere, everyone is seeking the single source of truth. And I think as much as in our professional lives, probably in our personal lives too, but on in terms of the technology systems, I feel data is so fragmented today. There cannot be a single source of truth, so you need to unify it. But I'm just tired of hearing this phrase after AI powered, of course. I think, Rahul, you take the brownie points there.
Okay, good. So we'll not have any single source of truth. You don't even like a 360-degree view. Would that work? Oh, okay. Okay, Dheeraj, over to you.
Yeah, I think, yeah, one word which I would like to retire is trade throughput processing, STP, right? Primarily because this is more of a misleading word, especially and has been used to death by people who essentially claim themselves to be AI powered, right? And talking about autonomous agent and end to end processing, right? Especially within financial crime and compliance, I really feel that you need to have that governance layer on top of everything you do, primarily because this is something which the regulators will come back and ask you, and they will ask you questions around each and every actions which you have taken. So straight throughput or STP is something which I would retire in that case.
Oh, that's a pretty interesting answer, right? So Rahul would want to go away with AI powered away. Kriti, you don't want a single source of truth, and then we don't want a state through processing. So these are interesting answers. I couldn't think of anything. Like I love jargons, right? I'm like, I want to use more of those, right? So we're gonna talk about agentic harness, semantic structures, context engineering, ontologies, agentic AI, neural computing, all of those jargons today when we talk about financial crime and compliance, right? So this is going to be a fun discussion that we're going to have on this one. But Rahul, I'm going to come back to you, right? We talk about AI powered and this market again. If you look at from a financial crime and compliance, we have so many claims from vendors as we do these research that hey, they're moving away from AI experimentation to more controlled execution. They're moving away from tools to now driving outcomes. The commercial models are evolving as we are seeing this, right? So I wanted to kind of ask you, right, as you are thinking of this, right, there's a lot of buyer pressures out here, right? So if you look at uh, technology decisions as a whole are not that easy, right? Because a lot of these technologies are deeply linked to the process and the ways of working. It is linked to how I build my human capital and my talent. It is also linked to how I integrate my data, and it also links to the business outcome that we are driving, right? So everything from real-time risk decisions to say themes like AI-enabled threat detections and monitoring to a governance of AI and the entire fragmented financial crime and compliance technology stack. Right? There's so much going on right now as we look at it, right? So I wanted to kind of hear from you, right? Before we get into this top 50, what was the research and what are the things from a buyer perspective, right? So a financial services institution or a payment firm or a capital markets firm or anybody else, right, who's buying financial crime and compliance technology, what is changing on their side?
Ronak, thanks for bringing that up and to set the context before we move on to the top 50. So, what one change which we have seen right now from our conversations with the providers and the enterprise ecosystem. So, one few of the biggest changes which we see is that now FinCrime technology is being judged against the speed and the complexity of the different businesses which we see there out in the financial institution space, right? So, taking payments as an example, so payments are becoming more faster and onboarding is more digital and fraud patterns are changing so quickly, and compliance teams are under constant pressure to show that hey, we have bought this technology but these controls are working. So now the buyers, they are not only thinking that do we have a solution, like do we have a KYC or an AML or a fraud system in place, but do these controls actually work in real time? Can they reduce the noise in the system and help us in supporting the investigators, and as important, give us that evidence which we can take to the regulator, right? uh, Another example we can think of is transaction monitoring. So where we see for a large North American bank where the enforcement case became a reminder that buyers are looking and saying that we need a better coverage, and how quickly that could become a boardroom conversation. And I retired the word AI powered, but like we cannot skip AI. Like it is another part. So banks are interested in AI, but they are asking how much harder questions now, that can this decision be explained or can a human review it? So the simple answer, buyers are moving towards this technology that is faster and more connected, but there are but these pressure points which they need to think around before they source or go into the market.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? You want to retire AI powered, but you keep using AI powered in the context of pen crime, right? That's interesting. Dheeraj, I wanted to take your view also on this, right? What feels different this year compared with earlier technology buying cycles in the financial crime and compliance, right? You've been tracking this space for so long, right? What's changed, right? What's new that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so in terms of how things have been changing in terms of FCC technology, right? So you would see when essentially we look at the leading providers, you do not only see one type of company, right? You would see a cohort who are essentially in the risk intelligence space. You would see a specialist around transaction monitoring. You would see behavioral biometrics platforms which essentially play a very important role in KYC, onboarding, and different sorts of platforms there. You would also find players who are especially around data analytics, which essentially are creating a lot of these knowledge graphs, right? So there is a broad enterprise tech player uh, landscape here. Now, this mix is something which is becoming more and more important. So we are seeing a lot of convergence here, right? And buyers essentially are not just looking for different sort of features. So they are not looking for, say, a specific AML tool or just a fraud and sanctions screening tool, right? Or just a KYC tool. They want more connected end-to-end risk view across the customer life cycle, right? And hence, you would also see some of the players who are succeeding in this space essentially are the ones who are showcasing more and more control over the outcomes,
Hmm.
be it around better entity resolution, um, faster onboarding, providing network intelligence with their knowledge graphs, right? A different sort of newer typology detections,
Yeah.
um, mule detection, right? Behavioral analytics. So these sort of different technology is what we are seeing, and essentially players who are able to connect all of these things together and bring in a more holistic offering in the market. Those sort of players are winning, and that's why buyers are also essentially looking at these are the ones which they definitely want to stay with, right? Rather than looking at providers who are giving you point based solutions for each and every outcome which the buyer is looking at.
Yeah, and I think you make a very important point around the outcome, right? And what is also important from an outcome perspective is that if you look at from a financial crime and compliance, we used to largely talk to the GRC or the compliance leader, right? And their priorities and the outcomes that we are looking at. I feel that suddenly changed, right? There are too many stakeholders that we need to kind of manage, right? If I was a technology provider in this market, I have too many different set of folks that I need to speak with, understand their priorities, and kind of align our offerings towards that. And Kriti, I know you kind of intricately deal with this issue, right? You help a lot of technology providers, but also the buyers who are making these decisions on terms of how should they look at the outcomes, the governance that they should do it, structure these contracts and deals and other pieces. So just wanted to get your view, right? What are you seeing in this multi-stakeholder decision view?
Sure, Ronak, and I think that's a very important point. While I know Dheeraj was talking about the outcomes, we also need to understand who are the stakeholders or who are the business leaders, who are the enterprise decision makers, who we and as tech providers need to influence. So, one thing typically, if I look at say 5 to 7 years ago, compliance teams used to be central to buying and taking all these procurement decisions on the technology platforms today. And I think earlier we were dealing with so many fragmented systems, separate risk systems, separate KYC fraud systems, and all. But now what is happening is all of these technology platforms are converging on the outside. So is the decision making converging on the inside of an enterprise. So what we see today is it manifests into different parts. While you will still have the compliance team in the picture, you will need to showcase the best of what the solution has to offer, how you will help them. But you still have the CIO group, for instance, who will want to understand, hey, how will this fit into my tech architecture? You will have a lot of the operations leaders who will ask you that how will it reduce the workload, how will it reduce the processes and the operational load that's existing today, right? Because FinCrime compliance as an area is very, very heavy on processes and all that work. If I also look at, say, different stakeholders like fraud teams, they are increasingly asking, right, will it impact some real time decisioning for me? And in all of it, the biggest question of all, like the governance and the risk teams are asking, right, can you explain and can we defend the decisions that these platforms will take? So the way we are seeing this is now everyone is having a seat at the table, everyone is looking at their own charters and how it will then mean and come together for the enterprise. So I will not say it's just about the budget or a single buying center alone. It's about how do you sell and influence the entire enterprise. That's, I think that's the biggest dynamic shift we are seeing in this space today.
No, and I think that's a fantastic point, right? Because from my vantage point, these unique stakeholders and their priorities all come together. And that's where the way we are also doing a lot of our assessments and reviews with our clients when they're making these technology decisions has changed, right? And one simple change that I've observed has been there used to be a lot of focus on feature functionality and coverage as a whole. We are now starting to move from that to more of a proof of enterprise fit, right? So again, if you look at 10 vendors providing one single fraud module, all of them can say, hey, I provide you the entire feature functionality checklist. They'll basically 98% will be up there, right? So the module coverage is very high. But what is becoming very important is, hey, does it fit into my enterprise, right? Into my technology strategy, my data strategy, my process, the way I want to run controls, the way I want to run the process, the exceptions. So that has become important, right? And it's not just about what the control plane or a control tower or governance that the vendor provides, but hey, is it part of a bigger control tower from an AI governance that I manage as a business, right? That my AI governance team or center of excellence manages. So the transparency and auditability and explainability that my AI center of excellence or my AI leader is asking, is this system providing or not? And that is becoming very important as we are starting to see it, right? And definitely, right, again, if I look at all of these factors are evolving to a great extent, right? And I know, Dheeraj, you seem to be in the middle of this, right? Because you are like on an average that I see, right, more than 6 or 7 inquiries coming to you every month where it is about and clients asking about these technologies and the vendors and the evaluations around it, right? In your way, right, how are buyers testing this proof of enterprise fit in the actual vendor evaluations that they do?
Yeah. So, Ronak, essentially buyers are becoming much more practical, is what I would say, right? Plus, they're also becoming more demanding in terms of vendor evaluations, right? In the past, essentially vendors could do reasonably well by demonstrating certain product features, right? In terms of this is my alert screen, or this is the machine learning model which we are using in our workflow, and this is our 6 month integration roadmap, right? But now those are the things possibly which is not working is what we are seeing live, right? Now the buyers are testing whether the solution can survive the complexities, the nuances of the enterprise environment. So there are multiple tests which they are seeing. The first one is whether there is a control framework which actually fits in the solution the tech provider is giving to them. So does it map to the organization's financial crime and compliance policies, roles, escalation paths, exception handling, and different sort of evidence requirements which the regulator or the auditor has asked, right? uh, if you are showcasing general AML capabilities or general sanction screening capabilities, buyers essentially won't be impressed with that. They would want that it actually fits in the entire control framework. So that is the first test. The second test would be around data and integration or data and governance readiness, right? In terms of whether the data can be connected to uh, or whether the platform can be connected to the actual data sources, different sort of case APIs, different sort of payment rails, right? Different sort of KYC systems, as well as some of the legacy architectures as well. So to basically simplify it, are you able to unify all of these different fragmented systems or not? The third test is what is the outcome or what is the actual operational impact, right? Will it reduce my false positives and by how much? Will it improve investigator productivity? What sort of cycle time reduction would I be seeing? And how much of the backlog would be cleared? And also, at the same time, it should not reduce my risk coverage, because in recent past we have seen you are able to improve the say for example the triggers, right, in terms of KYC, but then at the downstream level we were able to identify that a lot of volumes were increasing in terms of uh, false positives, right? So that sort of risk coverage is something which you do not want to reduce. And finally, AI governance is very much required. So
Yeah.
if AI is involved, which definitely would be involved, the buyers want to make sure that there is explainability, transparency, audit trails, and most importantly, human oversight has to be there, because you cannot blame the model for any sort of issues in the decisioning which you have taken.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And I think kind of resonates with me in terms of what I'm also seeing on the ground out here. Kriti, coming back to you, right? Because you have a bit of a much wider, I would say, view, right? Because you are looking at this from several lenses, right? Customer experience technologies, core banking, wealth management, lending, all of these have tie-in with financial crime and compliance, but also a lot of buyer decisions are becoming, we see some patterns observing, right? So just wanted to understand from you, right? What are these proof points that are becoming most important, right? Dheeraj talked about it at one lens, but as you see the enterprise buyers, as they are doing vendor shortlists, vendor selections, evaluations, what are the proof points that are becoming most important?
Sure, Ronak, and I think you make a valid point there. One of the key things that we are increasingly hearing and it's coming in from most of the enterprises today is, while integration is very very important, a lot of time enterprises are assessing the current set of suppliers as well, and that is where they are looking at internally within the current set of providers, so going beyond the feature functionality coverage, can my current set of suppliers also help me with some bit of pilot programs, can help with some integration testing? And I think reference checks is another piece that is quite understated, but it is very very important. So I know it's kind of very basics, but these are the basics that enterprises are now going back to, because there's so much noise today. There are so many providers. For every feature functionality you are getting a provider out in the market, and that's where these basics of having someone do these checks, the integration checks, the POCs, early POCs that can be done, any reference checks that can come and help. And then obviously the pieces that Dheeraj mentioned, right? So right from the governance piece, the integration readiness, the checklist on the compliance and the feature functionality coverage, those remain. Lastly, from an integration perspective, one other lens I want to add is, at times the conversation becomes narrow from a technology provider lens, because they are just thinking of their platform in isolation sitting into the enterprise technology estate. But there are multiple layers to it. If you peel away the onion, you have a different core banking system, you have a payment system, you will have a lending system. Say if it's a wealth management enterprise, you may have an advisor RM workspace, and all of them have overlap with the compliance systems. They will have data flows and processes running through each of it. So providers who can build this visual map for enterprises can demystify and bring more simplicity into this.
No, I think that makes sense, right? And again, demystification piece is the harder piece, right? How do you kind of cut out through the noise, and show the real value? And I think you guys are, um, I think, doing the God's work out here, right? Kind of through your research and kind of getting those answers out. And folks that are joining us or just joined us in the last few minutes, feel free to let us know if you have any questions as we go along these topics. We do have a takeaway for all of you, right? So If you are interested to learn more about our research on financial crime and compliance, we are having a uh, complimentary abstract and access available to one of our reports. You will see a QR code flashing throughout the presentation. So if you need the QR code, just scan it and then you can access the report, which is what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But before we get to the report and the top 50 results, and everybody's waiting for that, I did want to talk a little bit about AI, right? Because it is a very important topic. We are having so much conversations about AI, right? From uh, the AI costs, the AI governance, but also how AI is evolving over a period of time from an adoption perspective, where it was largely about machine learning, predictive analytics, and modeling, to now we're talking about generative AI, to now agentic and agentic workflows. This space has been evolving significantly, right? So, one of the things we do want to understand, and I think Dheeraj, this is where one of the topics that you and I were discussing right earlier, also I think last week, was about governance and the govern. I would say the augmentation of governance at scale, right? Because once we have that, then we can talk about autonomous decisioning, right? Right now, we are all talking about that human in the loop. What's your view on this, and how is that evolving?
Yeah, so Ronak, excellent point around governance, right? Um, and we really feel that there is a lot of interest from the buyers in terms of autonomous decisioning. And over time, we will see more and more agentic workflows, more automation of some of the simpler repetitive tasks, or even simpler repeatable decisions, right? But FCC is a complex environment where firms essentially cannot simply hand over high impact decisions to, say, a bot, right? So, near term opportunity would be much clearer in augmenting those decisioning, right? Where, for example, AI would be able to prioritize the alerts in terms of high, medium, low. They would be able to summarize the investigations. They can also help in writing the entire narrative, right? They can also help in identifying newer typology patterns, right? And also help investigators move across different tools more efficiently and seamlessly. So these are high value use cases, right? Because they would be improving productivity, they would be improving the consistency of the decision making, but they do not remove accountability from the human decision maker, right? So for FCC, the decision must be explainable, auditable, as well as defensible. And regulators and some of the internal control teams will ask which particular data was used, why was the alert deprioritized or prioritized, what sort of evidences supported this sort of a recommendation, uh, was there a four-eye check, who was the reviewer, how is the model being monitored, right? And also, was there a human override, and if there was, what was the reason for that, right?
Hmm.
So automation with governance, which essentially is governed augmentation, would give the institutions a way to capture the benefits of AI while
Yeah.
also making sure that they build trust with the regulators, right? So it becomes a bridge between your traditional rules and your machine learning on one side, and also a more autonomous agentic workflow on the other side. So the market will scale in stages. Rules as well as machine learnings are already mature in many areas where essentially organizations are fine tuning them. Usage of Gen AI to augment the customer or the entire SAR narrative is also scaling, because essentially it is improving investigative productivity. While agentic workflow is something which we will see soon to follow these two stages. But again, it would be in more controlled settings first
Yeah.
before it actually gets into a more scaled stage.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Makes sense. I think the need for that maturity curve needs to happen, and how that moves along, right? And Rahul, you work with a lot of these financial crime and compliance technology providers, their executives across product as well as growth. what should the providers take away from this AI adoption curve?
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, Ronak, for bringing in the provider angle here. So what we have seen is that providers, they should take away that it's there in the market that yeah, we are interested in AI, but they are not sort of looking for that uncontrolled automation. And some of the most like attractive use cases right now which we have seen in, which are getting adopted are alert prioritization, case summarization, helping you draft the SAR narratives, entity search, kind of those. So these are some of the use cases which are solving the real problems for enterprise which we see. And the providers would, they would be positioning, if they position AI as an autonomous decisioning, then that will create sort of a concern in many institutions. So the better way to approach is to position AI is like a governed decision support, and they should clearly tell like what the AI does, what type of control the human still owns, what type of evidence is generated, how is the model being monitored and validated, and how the institutions can explain it later to the auditor. And one interesting thing which we have seen recently from from the guidance coming in from Federal Reserve, which governs the model risk management for over a decade now. In their latest update, they have uh, surprised to see that they have explicitly excluded agentic and generative AI from its scope, because they also feel that these technologies are evolving rapidly and traditional model validation is required till there are guardrails specified by institutions level, until formal AI regulations are there. So still the buck stops with an enterprises that how do they want to have that control layer, and supervisory actions, they are still not defined for agentic and in their model risk management till now.
Yep, makes sense. No, Rahul, this is helpful. And again, we cover a lot of this in our research, right? So this is another soundbite where if you have more questions about this topic, feel free to let us know in the chat. We'll be happy to answer as we go along. But I think the moment that we are all waiting for, we do want to talk about the top 10, the top 50 financial crime and compliance technology providers. So I think here it goes, right? So I'm kind of doing like a virtual drum roll and kind of bringing them out here. But Kriti, I wanted to get your views first, right? As we look at the top 50, what are we seeing from the top 10 out here?
Sure, Ronak. And again, I want to call out, first of all, the top 10 in our top 50 FCC Technology Providers 2026 research. So LexisNexis Risk Solutions, Nice Actimize, Quantexa, Finergo, WorkFusion, and UiPath Company now. We have Moody's, we have Oracle, we have Tukitaki, we have Symphony, and I think there is some bit of an issue with the logo there, but we also have LSEG Risk Intelligence on 6. So
Yeah.
congratulations to all the 10, and congratulations on getting the placement. So Ronak, one thing that definitely stands out for me this year, and I know this is a research we do every year, year and a half. So the biggest piece that I see coming out from 2026 research is that the market is rewarding not just on feature functionality alone, but how well you can execute, how well you have the partnerships. Because our framework of assessment is not just looking at the size and scale and feature functionality alone. We are equally looking at how big and diverse is the partnership ecosystem, how well are you entrenched with the hyperscalers, the system integrators, in addition to the feature functionalities, how much are you investing in your own roadmap, and at the same time, what and the biggest piece on everyone's mind, how you're thinking about AI. So congratulations again to the top 10, and I think this is my key takeaway as I looked at the top 10 for this year.
Perfect. No, again, thank you, Kriti, kind of sharing your views. Dheeraj, quick reactions. What are you seeing out here?
Yeah, so when I look at the leading providers, I am seeing there is a good mix of uh, different sort of FCC capabilities converging together, right? In terms of bringing in AML, fraud, sanctions, KYC, and investigations. So I can see a more connected risk view across the customer life cycle is what these different providers are bringing in. So they are also, I can see logos which are increasingly strong in data. I can see logos who are bringing in better entity resolution. I can see logos bringing in network intelligence, behavioral analytics, and also some of the contextual risk signals, right? So and then also smarter models, better point capabilities, right? And hence essentially these are the players who are able to support complex decisioning, who are able to scale globally within different geos, and also are able to integrate into different sort of enterprise in environments.
Yeah, that makes sense. And folks who are joining us on this LinkedIn live, or if you're going to see the recording, if you want to access the report and get more details, we'll flash a QR code. You can scan it, or let us know in the comments if you want to get access to our report. You can use the QR code and you'll get a complimentary copy of our top 50 financial crime and compliance technology market report. It has a lot of details out here, and we're going to kind of walk you through some of the details today on this LinkedIn live, but I know that the report has much more buried inside as we kind of look at it. But Kriti, I know the top 10 you spoke about, but the overall top 50 list, right?
Yeah.
How do buyers make sense of this? How should they use this?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question because 50 providers is a lot, and there's even a much bigger set out there beyond this 50 as well. But I'll build upon what he just spoke about few seconds back, right? So the player mix is very diverse. So you have players who are not just doing transaction monitoring or fraud or sanctions alone, but also there are players who are doing some amazing work in identity verification, even risk intelligence, network intelligence. So the way I would say to read this top 50 is there's a very big breadth of innovation and capability across the market. And the right provider for an institution today is specifically tied to what the institution is looking for. So my at least suggestion here is rather than indexing or fixating on who is ranked where, what is the rank, I will encourage buyers to ask which providers are aligning best to what I am looking for. This is my future state. This is what I'm trying to solve for. Because this is kind of like the market map that we want to start with. It will help buyers to look at the landscape, identify providers, and make more informed decision versus just looking at a rank or a particular area in isolation. So that would be my guidance here, Ronak.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful, right? Because there's so much of breadth of coverage out here, right? And Rahul, I want to come to you, right? You've been kind of working through this a lot, and I know the slide has gone again wonky, but as you look at it, right, there are so many different areas, right? So we're talking about transaction monitoring, FRAML, advanced fraud protection, real-time screening, network and consortium intelligence, trade finance, crypto compliance, right, risk intelligence, and typology innovation. There's so much happening out here. So, what are you seeing?
Yeah. So what we see is that this breadth particularly tells us that FCC modernization is becoming more, if I call it as layered. Uh, if we compare it, so at the bottom of the layer, you can see institutions, they need strong data and identity solutions. That includes your customer data, entity data, ownership data, and various kind of lists which we maintain. Above that layer, if we see, we need controls that work across KYC, screening, AML, fraud, sanctions, and reporting. And above that layer, you need a workflow, orchestration, and analytics to help teams make faster and better decisions. So, of course, across all this, they need governance, explainability, not to mention. So, the list, it shows that it reflects this layered market, and some providers here are broader platforms, some, as Kriti and Dheeraj mentioned, are specialists, some of them are data providers. So that is very important because most enterprises will not solve their FCC modernization journey with just one provider, but through an ecosystem is what we are seeing. And these specific categories which we just saw, these are how and where buyers are demanding, and some kind of what we call as provider innovation is clustering. So that is why we see a broad list of providers which we have recognized under these 8 categories to help taking that decision and bring out that differentiation in the market, which is around precision, speed, governance, if I would like to call that out.
Yeah, and these are very important categories, right? So the four out here and this four and the other ones, right? So, any views on this, Rahul, that you wanted to share on these categories?
Sure. So if we talk about where the buyer demand and provider innovation are clustering, so if we talk about say transaction monitoring modernization as a category, it remains central because many institutions they still struggle with high false positives and the static rules where investigators are still loaded. So buyers they want monitoring that is more precise and scalable, if I like to call that out. And
Hmm.
then very another important is our real-time screening and orchestration, and that is becoming one of that critical layers which I earlier talked about. Because if we see for example payments which are becoming more real time, risks are becoming more dynamic. So earlier there was this window where you could probably hold the transaction in, if we see some of those traditional layers, but with real time payments all those have to be solved in say milliseconds, and that is also where fraud and AML sort of converge. So that brings us to Framel convergence as a theme. Earlier, which they used to sit in separate buckets, now because of scam mule networks, we don't have those 30-day sort of monitoring time. So if so now AML it sort of supersedes your fraud, and that is why both of them are coming together. And network and consortium intelligence is one important recognition category which you would like to call out, because what we have seen is that one institution it rarely sees the full criminal network. You may be sitting out of a different geography, or you may be have a different business model, but somehow those typologies are related, and through this network these shared typologies and consortium data, these intelligent models can help institutions see pattern which some of their other peers are seeing but they are invisible to. So it's kind of a defense like which they can build before that scenario hits them.
That's helpful, right? Again, as we think through this, and this again, this report, as I look at it, right, it's about the financial crime and compliance technology providers. How are we segmenting them into different categories, their capabilities, their breadth of coverage, and this becomes a starting point of vendor shortlisting, and then obviously having more deeper conversation with Rahul, you and your teams, right, as we look at it. But the other component to this is also about how do we think about the ecosystem and the partnerships, right? But before I do that, there's one question that came in, and I'm just kind of looking at it. um, it says, hey, it's a good list. Any newcomers and challenges that caught your eye other than AI? Any new trends you spotted? I don't know. Rahul, you want to take the first one, which is newcomers and challengers that caught your eye? Or Dheeraj, one of you, who caught your eye?
So I think I can start and maybe
Yeah.
folks can add to it. So one thing definitely that's different this year is if you look at our recognition list. And these are, I think, not lists. I would call them mini reports in itself, because we are seeing so much innovation and the market has moved so much in the last 12 to 15 months that these recognition, the 8 categories, they have themselves undergone a different typology change. And at the same time, you have easily 12 to 15 providers in each of these categories. So to the question from the audience, I think beyond the top 10 that we were also talking about, that we're not just looking at the breadth, but the ecosystem of partnerships, I would say every player on this list is innovating in some form or the other. And these recognition categories is what I will suggest to look at versus looking at a player in isolation.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And also, Kriti, from a trend perspective, one of the things I've been observing over a period of years, but I think it's becoming very important, is there are these market infrastructure providers. They are becoming very critical in the financial crime and compliance space, right? So they're not just providing you transaction facilities and transaction data and intelligence around it. They're kind of going, I would say, downstream or upstream, the way you want to look at it, into more the process of the what the banks and the payment firms and others are working, right? So if I look at Dow Jones, if I look at LSEG, London Stock Exchange, if I look at Nasdaq, and others, right? They are investing or acquiring or building capabilities which are more financial crime and compliance solutions. So that is one trend which has been there for around. But the amount of investment these companies are doing in building those technology solutions, which are backed by their underlying data capabilities, engineering capabilities, and the market infrastructure scale that they have, they're kind of trying to punch above and kind of take market share from the other leaders in this space who've been dominant for a long time, right? And the other one
Yeah.
that I would say, yeah, go ahead, Pratik. Yeah.
No, just to add to that, in fact, we were also pleasantly surprised in this year's research because the player category that you are mentioning, we have traditionally seen them as providers of intelligence with these massive data sets. I think
Mm-hmm.
they have also realized there's an adjacency for them to utilize that intelligence and the data sets to build something on top of it, which is, I think, a pleasant surprise, I would say. It remains to be also seen how enterprises react to it. But if I look at our top 50, some of them are already punching above their weight.
Yeah, and to the question, right, that Brandon asked, which is like, are there newcomers on the list? I would say there are newcomers that did not make to the list, right, and that would be a good offline conversation to have, because obviously they're doing something very innovative and new, but it's just that the size, scale, the customer confidence is not there yet to be kind of featured on this report, right? So that's where it becomes interesting. So going back to my earlier point, right, before the question is the ecosystem, right, and if you move to the next slide, one thing that I did want to talk about is that the financial crime and compliance technology providers have a rich ecosystem that they work with, right? And one is hyperscalers, right? So Dheeraj, I wanted to get your view, right? Why is this so important?
So yeah, I would also like to answer a bit of the second part of the question, right?
Okay.
Which is around what are the newer areas. So yeah, newer areas, which is not just AI, essentially would be around your real-time payment screening, your fraud detection, network analytics, right? Crypto compliance, right? These are some of the new areas which we identified and have also included them as recognitions, right? And with that, we also saw that in order to make good uh, success in these newer areas, hyperscaler partnerships becomes very important. Why? Because they make deployment more cloud ready. They improve the access to some of the scalable infrastructure, which for some of these providers would take a much longer time, right? They support data and analytics modernization, and they also align FCC technology with the broader industry cloud strategy for some of the larger banks and financial institutions, right? Now, why this matters more? Because the FCC workloads are becoming much more demanding. The need for real-time screening, the need for catering to excessive volumes around fraud detection, network analytics, investigation support, as well as large-scale monitoring or risk intelligence becomes much more important, and there is increasing requirement for these areas. So, cloud partnership essentially would be able to support that foundation, and hence for providers, hyperscaler partnerships are becoming more like a credibility as well as a market access lever, right? So being part of an industry cloud ecosystem are helping these providers reach the enterprise buyers, support some of the um, uh, GTM motions, accelerating deployments, and also the solution is basically ready for some of the larger modernization expectations. But again, uh, hyperscaler partnership is not a substitute for FCC domain depth. So hyperscalers standalone essentially might not be the ones who would be able to support end to end with the domain as well. Hence, bio should not treat just cloud presence as a proof of control effectiveness, right? So it's an enabler and not the outcome. So best position is where a buyer is combining FCC expertise, stronger governance as well as integration, and also cloud scalability together.
Yeah, and there's another point, right, Dheeraj, which is this shift, right, that we are observing from, hey, cloud is the infrastructure where these technology providers are hosting their software as a service, to kind of building this cloud native and now AI native FCC technology architecture, right? That are cloud enabled, right? And Rahul, I know you've been kind of tracking this. Any quick views on that?
Yeah, sure. So, Ronak, earlier we used to see why cloud journey the enterprises used to take from hosting. Now, uh, that has happened. Now, the term which we are seeing in the market is how these cloud-enabled FCC architecture mean for the solution design, right? So because they are designed to work with the enterprise broader data, their AI layer, their security and workflow environment, and in a way that is a much bigger shift. So if you see cloud-enabled architecture, FCC controls, they can connect more easily with the customer master data, data lakes, their different payment platforms, their case workflows, etc. So it also creates a better foundation for your advanced analytics, your model monitoring, helping take those real-time decisioning. And this matters because financial crime, as we all know, is becoming more data intensive. A bank may need to connect to a customer identity, corporate ownership, how does the UBO pattern look like, what are those entity graphs which we see, how has the behavior been over the years. And this is hard to do if every FCC tool sits in a separate silo. And cloud enabled architecture also brings in one important factor, which is governance, so that
Mm.
buyers can better manage access to controls, data residency, and those audit trails. So earlier we used to see questions like, hey, where is the software hosted? And now we are seeing, does your architecture help us run better FCC controls at scale? So
Yeah.
that is the shift which we are seeing.
Yeah, no, that's so important, right? And I think that native architecture where you're taking the cloud native capabilities and kind of bringing it bare into your software and kind of to your customers and kind of making it easier and also cost effective for customers to consume all that innovation in a more safe environment and purpose built environment is important, right? The last thing we want to talk about is system integrators, right? Because if you look at on the next slide, system integrators and consulting firms are partnering with the financial crime and compliance technology providers, building talent, implementation playbooks, as well as a lot of consulting and engineering support around these, softwares, right? To make them be available in the client environment, but also make them work right to the right advantage of the client. So this space has been evolving, and Dheeraj, I know you work with a lot of these system integrators as well, right? So how are system integrators and advisory firms, right, becoming central to the FCC technology transformation, right? You're doing the financial crime and compliance operations peak metrics assessment, right? So I know this is one of the core topics that you care a lot about. So give us your views.
Absolutely, Ronak. So, see, this is an area which Everest Group as a firm also has been tracking for almost 30 years now, right? So, and for a lot of these buyers, right, hard part is not only selecting the right tool, hard part is making sure that the tool works across data, controls, works across with different workflows, with different sort of people, skills, governance, and change management. And this is where SIs and advisory firms becomes important. They help translate technology capabilities into an operating model, and they support data integration, control redesign, operational redesign, changes in the workflows, bringing in the model governance, testing, migration, training of the people, and in the end helps with the overall benefit realization and hence the ROI. So it plays a critical role in environment which has multiple vendors and environment where there are multiple tools across KYC, AML, fraud, sanction, etc. So for providers, SI and advisory partnership becomes very important to expand their reach, improve their implementation confidence, and also benefit realization for the buyers. And for buyers, essentially, it also not only improves benefit realization, it also reduces execution risk and help ensure the business case turns into an actual return on investment.
Perfect. No, this is fantastic, right? And again, thanks, Dheeraj, for kind of sharing your views on this. And system integrators are important, right? So I know we're coming at the close of it. Folks who are joined us live and those who are kind of listening to our recording, you know who we are. So always reach out to us for questions and your thoughts. We'll always be willing to answer. If you need to learn a lot more about the financial crime and compliance technology top 50 research, you have the QR code up here, so feel free to kind of scan the QR code and download the report or request 30 minutes of conversation with us. We always love to talk and chat about all the good things that's happening in this industry. So I wanted to quickly wrap up and one rapid fire closing round with my team. as we kind of get there, right? So, Dheeraj, I'm going to come to you, right? So, what is that one message you would leave with the financial crime and compliance technology providers?
Um, Essentially, the message would be to focus more on the domain and focus more on outcome.
Domain and outcomes, right? That's very important. Kriti, as buyers are making decisions on technology, what is that one message that you would want to leave the enterprise buyers with?
So my message would be that focus less on the shiniest demo or the most advanced technology, but focus more on building your right ecosystem, both internally and externally. As your teams are converging internally, so is the ecosystem of partners and hyperscalers. So focus more on the ecosystem.
Ecosystem, right? So we had domain outcomes ecosystem. Rahul, you are the champion of the space. What are your wise words for all of us?
So my broader message is that, like, the era we are entering in FinCrime, so FCC Technologies, I would call it as entering a more disciplined phase. We are seeing a lot of innovation in the market, right? We have talked about agentic workflows, network intelligence. So that all is exciting to hear, right? But at the same time, financial compliance is a regulated and highly accountable environment. So we need to match. Enterprises will reward that innovation, which comes with more governance. So I would like to call it how the providers can be more disciplined.
Okay, so disciplined is the word. Perfect. So this is good. Again, all three of you, thank you for the time. This was an exciting discussion, and like as you're kind of going through it, it kind of made me reflect on this space, right? Again, how important and critical work this is from a financial crime and compliance, right? This is stopping billions of dollars of fines. This is stopping billions of dollars of fraud. This is kind of protecting governments and their sovereignty. This is protecting banks and customers. It is very important work that this entire ecosystem does, and we are, I would say, proud and privileged to kind of play a small part in it, kind of studying it and giving our point of view. So thank you everyone who was joining us, and thank you team for this insightful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.